The deep roar of the Cadillac Escalade engine echoed as it pulled into the driveway. That was my SUV, bought with the inheritance money my late father left me 3 years ago. But the title and registration were in my husband Richard's name. I did that to protect his ego in front of his corporate friends, so he would look like a successful, established man. However, this afternoon, the sound of the car door slamming aggressively signaled that the fake owner of the vehicle was in an explosive mood. I was sitting in the dining room, setting the plates for dinner. At the end of the table, my mother-in-law, Martha, was busy stuffing her face with expensive artisan chocolate truffles I had bought. Martha had been staying with us for 2 weeks, claiming she missed her future grandchildren. We did not even have kids yet. I knew the real reason was that the central air conditioning in her apartment was broken, and she was too cheap to fix it. The front door swung open violently. Richard walked in with wide strides. His face was bright red, but his eyes gleamed with a flash of arrogance I had never seen before. In his hand, he gripped a large manila envelope. Without taking off his leather shoes, he marched straight to the dining table and threw the envelope right in front of me. It landed on an empty porcelain plate with a loud smack, making Martha jump in her seat. "Open it," Richard ordered, his breathing heavy. I looked at him calmly, then slowly opened the envelope. Inside was an official letter from the corporate board of directors. Richard was being promoted to general manager. His salary was being tripled. "Oh my God, honey, congratulations," I said sincerely. I started to stand up to hug him, but Richard roughly swatted my hand away. "Save your congratulations," he said coldly. He pulled out the chair opposite me and sat down with a haughty posture, crossing his legs. "Now that I am the general manager, my status has changed. My social circle is going to be completely different, and I can no longer tolerate your sickening, wasteful spending habits." I frowned in confusion. "Wasteful? Richard, I have barely even bought any new clothes this year." "Do not lie to me," Richard snapped. He pulled out his smartphone and shoved a credit card notification in my face. "Look at this. $150 for vitamins. Are you insane? Do you think I am a walking ATM?" I stared at the screen. "Honey, those are the prenatal vitamins the fertility doctor recommended. You were the one who asked to start IVF prep this month, and half of those are supplements for your stamina." "Excuses," he scoffed. Martha suddenly chimed in, her mouth still full of chocolate crumbs. She glared at me with undisguised disgust. "You really are an ungrateful woman, Emily." Myson works his fingers to the bone. He leaves early in the morning and comes home late at night. You just sit around the house kicking your feet up, draining his bank account. What is the point of expensive vitamins if your oven is complete broken? Where is my grandchild? Still nothing, right? My heart dropped hearing Martha's cruel words. Instead of defending me, Richard nodded in agreement with his mother. "Mom is right," Richard said, his voice sharp and piercing. "All this time I have kept my mouth shut while watching you blow through my cash, buying home decor, changing the custom drapes, buying silk sheets. You thought I did not notice?" I took a deep breath, trying to hold back the anger rising to my head. "Richard, I bought those drapes and sheets using my own personal savings, not your salary. Your paycheck is barely enough to cover the electric bill and our daily groceries." "Liar." Richard slammed his fist on the table. The plates rattled. "Do not you ever dare belittle your husband. I make a massive salary. If it were not for your careless spending, we would be millionaires by now." Richard stood up, pointing a trembling finger right in my face. He was so close I could smell the expensive designer cologne he had just bought. A cologne that cost way more than the vitamins he was just screaming about. "Listen to me very carefully, Emily," he hissed. "Starting right this second, I am no longer transferring any grocery money into your account. Give me the debit card you are holding. Hand it over." Richard snatched my wallet off the table, pulled out the debit card I usually used for groceries, and snapped it in half right in front of my eyes. "I am sick and tired of funding your life," Richard shouted. His voice echoed through every corner of this luxury suburban home. "Starting tomorrow, my money's no longer for you. You are just a parasite in this house. If you want to eat, go make your own money. If you want to buy your garbage vitamins, get a job. Stop being a leech attached to my back." Martha laughed cynically. "Good for her. Let her learn her lesson." Richard. "Let her realize that without you, she is just street trash." I fell silent. A dead quiet blanketed the dining room. There was an agonizing pain in my chest, but strangely, no tears fell. That pain quickly morphed into something cold and hard. A sudden realization slapped my logic awake. The irony was so ridiculous I almost laughed out loud. They were standing on imported Italian marble floors that I paid for, sitting on Restoration Hardware mahogany chairs that I bought in cash, taking shelter under a roof whose deed was sitting safely in my personal safe deposit box, not Richard's. Yet, this man in front of me, who had just gotten a tiny taste of power, felt like he was a king who owned the world. He did not know, or maybe heckos to forget, that the entire foundation of his life was me. "Are you sure about that?" I asked quietly. My voice was flat, completely devoid of emotion. "Are you absolutely sure you do not want to fund anything in this house anymore?" "I am dead sure," Richard challenged, puffing out his chest. "Starting tomorrow, my money is my money. You take care of yourself. If you do not like it, feel free to pack up and get out of my house." "Your house?" I asked, raising an eyebrow. "Yes, my house. I am the head of the family here," he barked. "Come on, Mom. Let us go eat at a fancy steakhouse. I want to celebrate this promotion. Let this useless wife eat cold leftovers in the kitchen." Richard grabbed his mother's arm, and the two of them walked out without even looking back at me. Martha actually spat a little on the floor before stepping out the door. Shortly after, I heard the engine of my beloved Escalade roar to life, carrying away the two most ungrateful human beings I had ever met. After they left, I sat alone at the massive, empty dining table. My eyes scanned the room. The crystal chandelier hanging above my head cost $5,000. The abstract painting on the wall was $2,000. The massive smart TV in the living room, the double-door smart fridge, even the expensive leather sofa where Richard usually fell asleep after work. Everything, absolute everything, was bought with my money. I stood up slowly and walked toward the large window facing the manicured backyard. The sky outside was turning dark, as pitch black as my heart right now. Richard had just lit the fuse that was going to blow his own life into pieces. He dared me not to use his money. Fine, I accept the challenge. But he forgot one crucial detail. If I am not allowed to use his money, then he has absolutely no right to use my things. I pulled my phone out of my loungewear pocket. My finger calmly scrolled to a specific contact. "Hello, Daniel," I said when the line connected. "Hey, Emily, it is rare for you to call this late in the afternoon. Do we have a legal issue to sort out?" Daniel's deep voice came through the speaker. He was my trusted attorney and my childhood best friend. "Not a legal issue, but an asset relocation issue," I answered coldly. "I need a massive moving crew with large box trucks tonight. And please get a team ready to cut off the electricity and internet that are registered under my name." "Where are you moving tonight?" Daniel sounded shocked. "I am not moving, Daniel. My belongings are going home to a storage facility," I explained, staring blankly at the empty garage. "My husband just told me he does not want to fund my life anymore, so I am going to make sure he lives only with what is truly his." "All right, Emily. I understand where this is going. I am dispatching the crews right now." I hung up the phone. A faint smile formed on my lips. Richard thought he had just won a battle by intimidating me. He had no idea. He had just awakened the sleeping giant that had been holding his entire life together. Tonight was going to be a very long night, and tomorrow, he would wake up in the exact hell he created for himself. While waiting for the moving crew Daniel sent, I walked into the master bedroom. Richard's scent still lingered in the air, a scent I used to love so much, but now it made me nauseous. I opened the nightstand drawer and pulled out an old photo album tucked beneath a stack of business magazines. My hands trembled as I opened the first page. An old, faded photograph taken 5 years ago. In that picture, Richard looked completely different. He was skinny, unkempt, with dark circles under his eyes. He wore a faded dress, shirt, and slacks that were too baggy. Next to him, I was smiling widely, holding onto his arm with so much hope. My mind drifted back, traveling through the tunnel of time to that exact era. The era where this massive lie began. 5 years ago, Richard was not the arrogant general manager he is today. He was a desperate, unemployed man. We had just eloped at the local courthouse because he said he did not have the funds for a real wedding or a proper reception. I, being naive and blindingly in love, accepted his excuses. I came from a very wealthy family. My late father left me several commercial properties and a massive stock portfolio in a private holding company that generated enough dividends to feed me for 7 lifetimes. But my father always taught me to be humble. Because of that, I never flaunted my wealth to Richard. I wanted him to love me for who I was, not for my trust fund. A month after our courthouse wedding, disaster struck. That night, a massive understorm hit the city. We were living in a cramped, dingy studio apartment because Richard stubbornly insisted on being independent, refusing my offer to move into my luxury condo. Suddenly, someone started pounding on our apartment door brutally. "Open up or we are breaking it down," a heavy voice shouted from the hallway. Richard, who was sleeping next to me, instantly woke up, his face pale as a ghost. He was shaking violently. Cold sweat poured down his face even though the room was freezing. "Who is that, Richard?" I asked in terror. "Emily, please help me," Richard cried, dropping to his knees at my feet. "They are loan sharks. I owe $30,000 to an offshore sports betting syndicate, Emily. The interest piled up. If I do not pay them tonight, they are going to kill me." My world collapsed right then and there. The husband I thought was just a hardworking guy having bad luck in the job market turned out to be a gambling addict. The banging on the door grew louder, accompanied by the sound of glass breaking from the window. Seeing Richard curled up like a terrified little boy, my pity completely overrode my common sense. I could not let my husband die a senseless death. I told Richard to hide in the bathroom. Then, I opened the door. 3 massive, heavily tattooed men stood there, ready to tear the apartment apart. That night, to save Richard's life, I did something I never should have done. I wired $30,000 from my personal savings, the money I was supposed to use to start my dream boutique, straight to the loan shark's boss. 30 grand vanished in an instant just to pay for Richard's sins. When the thugs left, Richard crawled out of the bathroom and hugged my legs. He sobbed uncontrollably. He swore to God he would never touch betting again. Promised he would work hard, that he would make me happy, and that he would pay me back every single penny tenfold. "Please do not tell anyone, Emily," he begged pitifully that night. "Especially my mother. Do not ever let my mom know I had gambling debts. Please protect my pride. Just tell everyone that money was our joint savings." And that was my second biggest mistake. I agreed. I buried his shameful secret deep. Since that day, I started using my family connections in secret. I asked my uncle, who happened to be on the board of directors at the corporate firm where Richard applied, to prioritize Richard's resume. Of course, without Richard knowing, he got the job, and he believed it was purely based on his own merit. I let him believe that lie to build his confidence. Years passed, and Richard's career climbed, mostly because I frequently gave him business strategy advice at home, advice he then claimed as his own brilliant ideas at the office. But as his job titles grew, his attitude changed drastically. The gratitude he once cried about slowly evaporated. He started feeling invincible. He started to forget that the suit he wore to his very first interview was bought by me. He forgot that the luxury SUV he drove to the office was my car. He started inventing a brand new narrative in his head that he was a self-made man, a successful guy who built his empire from zero, and I was just a lucky wife he picked up along the way. The most painful part was Martha's role. My mother-in-law never knew about Richard's gambling debt. As far as she knew, her son was a flawless angel. Richard, in his effort to cover up his dark past, frequently used me as a scapegoat in front of his mother. "Emily is asking for more money again. Mom, I am so stressed," Richard complained in the phone one day. The reality was, he was currently borrowing my money Toppet custom rims on the SUV. "Emily is too lazy to cook, Mom," he whined on another day. The truth was, I had just finished cooking his favorite pot roast, but he decided to go out drinking and eating with his buddies instead. Lie after lie piled up into a massive, solid iceberg. Richard had successfully brainwashed himself. He genuinely believed that he was the sole provider. He did not realize that the monthly paycheck he bragged so much about was usually gone by the second week of the month to fund his wannabe elite lifestyle. And the rest of the month was quietly covered by the dividends from my personal investments. The electricity, the water, the groceries, the car maintenance, even Martha's designer clothes. It all came out of my wallet. I slammed the photo album shut. The memories no longer made me sad. They made me sick. Disgusted with my past self for being so incredibly stupid, and disgusted with Richard for being so shameless. The sound of heavy truck horns blared in front of the house. Daniel's moving team had arrived. I stood up and looked at my reflection in the massive vanity mirror. A mirror that would also be loaded onto a truck tonight. The face staring back was no longer the naive Emily from 5 years ago. This was the face of an Emily who had finally woken up from a long, bad dream. "You called me a parasite, Richard," I whispered to my reflection. "Let us see what happens to the host when it loses the parasite that has actually been feeding it all along." I walked out of the bedroom to greet the workers. Good evening, Mrs. Emily. I am the crew foreman. What exactly are we loading up tonight? I smiled widely, pointing around the massive living room filled with luxury goods. Everything, sir. Everything except the floors and the walls. Take the sofas, the dining table, the televisions, the refrigerator, the stove, the beds, the wardrobes, the curtains, the rugs, even the light bulbs from that crystal chandelier. Leave one rusty folding cot in the basement for them to sleep on. Oh, and do not forget. Pack up all the men's clothing in the master closet, and all the old woman's clothes in the guest room that have Zara and Lululemon tags, because I still have the receipts with my name on them. Understood, ma'am? That night, the luxury home in the elite Chicago suburb became the silent witness to a massive, total evacuation operation. Within 4 hours, a house that was once warm and filled with expensive furniture turned into a freezing, echoing, empty cave. I worked in total silence, boxing up my belongings neatly. Every strip of packing tape I ripped felt like a bandage over my broken heart, sealing the past away forever. When the last truck pulled away, the clock struck 2 in the morning. I stood in the middle of the living room, which was now pitch black because I had unscrewed of light bulbs. Only the moonlight spilled through the bare windows. I slapped a bright yellow sticky note onto the completely empty white wall. My handwriting was short but precise. It was the answer to Richard's screaming earlier that afternoon. I walked out of the house, locked the front door, and got into the waiting Uber. I was never coming back here. Tomorrow, the script of this theatrical play was going to flip entirely. The queen had abandoned her fake castle, leaving nothing but ruins for the fraudulent king. Wait until tomorrow evening, Richard. Wait until you come home and see your actual kingdom. Before that massive storm erupted at the dining table, when Richard threw his salary envelope and insulted me as a parasite, I was actually already holding onto a massive secret, a secret far more dangerous than just a generic cheating scandal. I found this secret exactly 1 week before the day of his great insult. On a cloudy morning, a moment of Richard's carelessness opened the gates of hell for his own life. Last Tuesday morning, the house was in a chaotic rush. Richard woke up late. He was panicking, yelling as he looked for his favorite maroon silk tie, blaming me and calling me incompetent for not preparing his outfit. In reality, the tie washing perfectly behind the closed closet door, covered by a suit jacket he had carelessly tossed over it. I am leaving. Do not forget, do not cook anything weird tonight. My stomach is acting up, he yelled, snatching the Cadillac keys from the console table. He did not even kiss my forehead, a ritual that had vanished 6 months ago. After his SUV roared out of the driveway, I started cleaning the living room, which looked like a disaster zone from his panic attack. That was when my eyes caught a sleek, black object wedged between the couch cushions. Richard's iPad Pro. This was incredibly strange. Richard never let this tablet out of his sight. He carried it everywhere, even to the bathroom. He claimed it contained highly confidential corporate documents that nobody was allowed to see. Usually, this device was locked down tight with a passcode and Face ID. But today, probably because he was in such a frantic rush, he left it behind. At first, I had no intention of opening it. I wanted to be a wife who respected her husband's privacy. I planned to just put it in his home office desk drawer until he got back. But exactly as I lifted the tablet, the screen lit up. A message notification popped up on the lock screen. B. Morning, babe. The meeting is still at the usual hotel, right? I miss you so much. Oh, by the way, what about the $20,000 wire transfer for the condo down payment? The developer needs it today. My heart completely stopped. The blood in my body felt like it drained to my feet, making me instantly weak. Babe? Hotel? Condo down payment? My hands shook violently as I gripped the tablet. My brain spun fast, trying to stay in denial. But my gut screamed that my worst suspicions all this time were completely true. I tried to unlock it. Passcode. I tried our wedding anniversary. Wrong passcode. I tried his birthday. Wrong. I tried the day we started dating. Wrong. I closed my eyes, trying to think exactly like the Richard of today. A ego-driven, narcissistic, power-hungry man. I typed in a single sequence of numbers. 111111. All ones. Because he always needed to be number 1. Click. The screen unlocked. How incredibly simple, and how incredibly pathetic. I immediately opened the green messaging app. The contact named B was pinned at the very top, with hundreds of unread messages. I opened the chat log, and in that very second, the world I had patiently held together for 5 years shattered into a million pieces. B was Brittany, the new secretary in Richard's division, whom he frequently described to me as a slightly slow but eager-to-learn intern. It turns out the lessons Richard was teaching her had absolutely nothing to do with corporate management. I read their texts while fighting the urge to vomit. They were not just having an affair, they were relentlessly mocking me. Richard, just be patient, babe. The leech at home is asking for her monthly allowance again. I am so sick of looking at her innocent fake face. If it were not for the fact that she keeps the house spotless, I would have kicked her to the curb years ago. Brittany, I know, baby. Just hold on. Once you get promoted to GM, we can just kick her out immediately, right? We need a more private place, Richard. I refusetto live in her used house. My tears fell, splashing onto the tablet screen. So all this time, in Richard's size, I was just an unpaid maid he referred to as a leech. He only stayed with me for the comfort I provided, not for love. But that absolute heartbreak quickly turned into pure horror when I opened a file attachment Brittany had sent 2 days prior. The file was named Draft Budgeting Project X, Final Revision. Why would a secretary send a draft budget through a personal text message and not a corporate email? My business instincts, inherited from my father, instantly flared up. I opened the file. It was a detailed budget for the procurement of new manufacturing machinery for the Aurora plant, a project Richard would spearhead the moment he officially became general manager next week. My eyes scanned the numbers on the Excel spreadsheet. Something was glaringly wrong. There was a line item for imported machine parts totaling $400,000 from a vendor named Apex Solutions. That vendor name sounded completely foreign. As the shadow majority shareholder of the company, I had the entire list of approved corporate vendors memorized. Apex Solutions was not on that list. I immediately took photos of the tablet screen with my phone, then did a quick corporate registry search through my state's database on my phone. My suspicions were dead on. Apex Solutions was registered exactly 2 weeks ago, and the registered owner was Brad Miller. The exact same last name as Brittany. It was definitely her brother or a close relative. I went back to Richard's tablet and found the chat history that confirmed everything. Brittany, my brother got the LLC set up, babe. As soon as you sign off as GM, the $400K gets wired out immediately. We mark it up $200K, right? $200K goes straight into our pockets. We use the rest to buy refurbished junk parts, so it looks like a legit procurement. Richard, perfect. $200K is more than enough to put a down payment on a luxury condo downtown and pay a shark lawyer to divorce Emily. I need to make sure she does not get a single dime of alimony. There is no way I am letting her enjoy the fruits of my hard work. My hand clamped over my mouth, stifling the scream trying to escape my throat. This was not just an affair. This was a federal crime. Richard and Brittany were conspiring to embezzle corporate funds, the very company where I had parked my massive capital to fund their affair and my own divorce. They wanted to use my money, through my company, to throw me away. The irony was so thick it tasted bitter on my tongue. Richard was plotting to steal $200,000. He had no idea that $200,000 was just a standard quarter dividend payout for me. He was trying to be a petty thief inside the actual owner's house. I took a deep breath, aggressively wiping the tears off my cheeks. There was no point in crying. Crying would not save my company, and it certainly would not restore my dignity. I needed proof. Ironclad, undeniable, legal proof. With hands that were now perfectly steady, I went to work. I did not just take pictures. I opened the cloud storage feature on Richard's tablet and synced every single chat log and document straight into my private encrypted server. I copied voice memos, their explicit photos, and most importantly, the Excel file detailing their corruption scheme. The syncing process took 10 minutes, which felt like 10 agonizing years. My heart raced every time I heard a car pass by the house. Terrified, Richard would suddenly burst through the door, realizing he left his tablet. The moment the transfer was complete, I wiped the sync history. I placed the tablet back between the couch cushions, in the exact same spot and angle as when I found it. I turned the screen off. I stood up and stared at that black tablet like I was staring at a sleeping venomous snake. The weapon had officially changed hands. Richard thought that tablet was his secret vault. In reality, it was a ticking time bomb he was carrying everywhere. That afternoon, when Richard called me in a blind panic asking about his tablet, I answered with the most innocent, stupidly sweet tone I could muster. Tablet? Oh, the black screen thing, right, honey? Yeah, it is here on the couch. I saw it when I was vacuuming. I did not touch it, though. I was scared I would break it. You know I am terrible with technology. Oh, thank God, Richard sighed in relief on the other end of the line. A relief that sounded so incredibly naive to my ears. Do not touch it at all, okay? It is full of complicated corporate business. You would not understand a word off it. I will grab it when I get home. Okay, honey. Have a good day at work, I replied softly. I hung up the phone and looked at my reflection in the hallway mirror. The face of the submissive, obedient wife slowly faded away, replaced by the face of a woman orchestrating a declaration of war. You are right, Richard. It is full of complicated corporate business, and I understand it perfectly. I understand exactly how to use it to destroy you. That was the weapon I held. The weapon I kept tightly locked away for an entire week, waiting for the perfect moment. And that moment arrived this afternoon when you screamed at the top of your lungs that you no longer needed my money. Fine, Richard. Let us see exactly how well this brand new general manager survives, without his stolen cash, and without the wife who has been holding him up this entire time. Back in the present, the clock read 3:00 a.m. I was sitting on a plush cream-colored sofa in a presidential suite at a five-star hotel in downtown Chicago. The massive floor-to-ceiling windows in front of me displayed the glittering city skyline, a sharp contrast to the absolute darkness I had just experienced a few hours ago in the house that was now completely empty. Spread out across the marble coffee table were various legal documents, a glowing laptop, and 2 cups of steaming black coffee. Across from me sat Daniel, my lawyer. He had just finished reviewing the digital files I cloned from Richard's tablet a week ago. Daniel's face, usually calm and full of easy smiles, was now stiff and deadly serious. His jaw was clenched tight. Son of a bitch, Daniel muttered quietly, placing his reading glasses on the table. I am sorry, Emily. As your attorney, I need to remain objective. But ask the guy who has known you since kindergarten. I can confidently say your husband is a world-class piece of trash. This embezzlement scheme, it is highly organized. If you had not found it, the company could have lost hundreds of thousands, and he could have walked right away. I sipped my coffee, feeling the warm bitterness slide down my throat. That's exactly why I called you, Daniel. I do not want to just divorce him. Divorce is way too easy for him. He wanted to throw me out after draining my assets. I am going to make absolutely sure he has nothing left to throw away. The house evacuation operation is 100% complete, Daniel reported, opening his own tablet. Everything is locked in a secure, climate-controlled storage facility. That house is emptier than a haunted mansion. My foreman even said they unscrewed the toilet paper holders just like you asked. I smiled faintly. Good. That is my house, bought entirely with my father's inheritance money before I even married him. Legally, it is a premarital asset. He does not own a single inch of it. Now, let us talk about the finances. Daniel nodded and opened a new spreadsheet on his laptop. According to the asset protocol you requested, let us check them off one by one. Credit cards? Richard is holding 2 platinum cards and 1 black card. All of them are authorized user cards attached to my primary accounts. The combined limit is around $100,000, I stated. I called the private bank concierge 5 minutes ago. Under your authorization, every single one of those cards has been permanently frozen under the flag of unauthorized secondary user abuse, Daniel explained. Perfect, I said coldly. Let him feel the sheer humiliation of getting declined by a credit card machine when he tries to treat his whore to an expensive lunch tomorrow. What about the joint checking account? The account he uses for his direct deposits is technically a joint account, but the primary funding source is your monthly wire transfers, right? Daniel asked to confirm. His own salary was pathetic before this promotion. Correct. There is about $30,000 sitting in there. That is the accumulation of the money I deposit to cover the mortgage taxes and maintenance, I said. Drain every penny, I ordered firmly. Leave a minimum balance of exactly $5. That is my money. I have the wire transfer receipts to prove every deposit. He said his money is not for me. Okay, then my money is definitely not for him. Daniel typed rapidly. The clacking of the keyboard broke the silence of the hotel suite. Done. Funds have been routed to your secure private trust account. He is practically bankrupt now, Emily. He has 0 cash. His wallet is empty because you broke his debit card this afternoon, and his credit cards are dead plastic. Not enough, I said, standing up and walking toward the glass window. I stared at the streetlights glowing far below. He still has his job title. He still feels like a god because tomorrow is his first official day as general manager. He is still banking on that $200,000 corruption payout. About that, Daniel swiveled his office chair to face me. We have to tread carefully. We cannot just call the FBI or the cops right now. If we report it now, he has not actually committed the fraud yet. It is just a conspiracy or an attempt. The charges would not stick as hard. I turned around to face Daniel. I know. That is exactly why we are going to let them walk right into the trap. There is a corporate board meeting tomorrow, correct? His official inauguration meeting, and the approval session for the new project budget. Yes, tease. Nula All the executive directors will be there, including the chairman of the board, your Uncle Henry. I am attending, I declared. Daniel's eyes widened. You are going to attend the meeting as what? The GM's wife? No, I replied sharply. As the majority shareholder of Crestview Holdings, it is time for me to step out from behind the curtain. All this time I have been using the holding company shell to hide my identity so Richard would not feel emasculated. But tomorrow, I am sitting at the head of that boardroom table. Daniel broke into a massive grin, a smile filled with absolute awe. That is brilliant. You are going to let him present his embezzlement scheme right to your face. Exactly. Let him present it. Let him proudly submit that fake vendor, Apex Solutions. The second he officially submits that document to the board on the record, it instantly becomes legal evidence of corporate fraud and document forgery. That is when I raised my right fist in the air and slowly opened my fingers as if detonating a bomb. We destroy him. A highly dramatic climax, Daniel commented. But Emily, are you mentally prepared for this? You are going to watch a man be destroyed right in front of your eyes. A man you used to love. Daniel's question made me pause for a second. Was I ready? I remembered Richard's face from this afternoon. The face full of pure hatred as he pointed his finger at me. The exact same face I saw in those explicit photos with Brittany. That love had died a long time ago. Eaten away by lie after lie. The only things left were pity and a burning desire for justice. Karma. I am not destroying him, Daniel, I answered quietly, but with iron resolve. Had destroyed himself the second he chose to betray me. I am just acting as the hand of God delivering his consequences. I sat back down on the sofa. One last thing. The house utilities. Oh right. Electricity, water, internet, all under your name. Cut them all off, I ordered. Schedule the hard shutoff for tomorrow at exactly 12:00 p.m., right when the afternoon sun is at its hottest. I want to make sure that when he gets home from getting fired, he cannot even turn on a fan to cool down his exploding head. Ruthless, Daniel chuckled. But completely fair. I will submit the disconnect requests through the utility portals right now. We spent the rest of the night detailing the exact script for tomorrow's boardroom ambush. Daniel prepared all the legal binders, the termination papers, the proof of my majority ownership, and the bank records of me paying off his gambling debts just in case he tried to play the victim and open his mouth. And, of course, printed copies of the explicit chats and the embezzlement spreadsheets. Just before dawn, Daniel headed home to change and prep. I was left alone again in the massive hotel suite. I laid back on the plush king-size mattress, infinitely more comfortable than sleeping with constant anxiety next to a traitor. I stared at the ceiling. Tomorrow was going to be an incredibly long day. Act 1 of my revenge was psychological warfare. That was going to happen later this evening, when Richard came home to an empty void. But before that, I had to prepare my mind for the factual, legal slaughter at the office the day after. I closed my eyes, picturing Richard's face when he opened the front door later. Would he come home holding flowers or fancy takeout to celebrate his victory in subduing me? Or maybe he would bring Brittany home to introduce her to his mother. Whatever it was, he was going to be greeted by absolute emptiness. The exact same emptiness he had given me for the entire duration of our marriage. The only difference was, the emptiness I was giving him was physical. Freezing floors, pitch-black darkness, and dead silence. Enjoy your freedom, Richard, I whispered into the dark, before finally falling into a deep sleep. The most restful, peaceful sleep I had experienced in 5 years. Tomorrow, the real game was finally going to begin. That afternoon, the Chicago sky was a heavy gray, as if mourning or laughing at the fate of a man who was about to lose absolutely everything. I sat cross-legged on my plush hotel bed, a warm cup of lemon tea on the nightstand, with an iPad resting on my lap. The screen was split into 4 video feeds, streaming live from hidden security cameras I had installed in the main rooms of my house. The house that was now a complete and total void. This was my own private theater, and I had paid for the tickets with years of patience and heartbreak. At exactly 5:15 p.m., a motion alert pinged on the screen. The black Cadillac Escalade my car pulled into the driveway. From the garage camera, I watched Richard step out, glowing with pride. He was wearing expensive aviator's sunglasses, despite the heavy overcast sky, posing like some Hollywood celebrity. Behind him, Martha struggled out of the passenger seat, gripping several high-end designer shopping bags. It seemed they had just celebrated his promotion by blowing through cash. God knows whose money they used, probably the last few physical bills left in Richard's designer wallet. Ugh, Richard, these bags are so heavy. Call your wife out here and tell her to carry them. Martha's shrill voice was picked up perfectly by the sensitive outdoor microphones. Relax, Mom. Starting right now. Emily needs to learn her place. She is going to serve us like royalty, Richard replied arrogantly as he pushed his key into the front door. I held my breath. My eyes were glued to the living room feed. The heavy wooden door swung open. Richard took one step inside with a massive grin, ready to bark orders. But that smile froze instantly. He stopped so abruptly that Martha, walking right behind him, slammed into his back. Why are we stopping in the doorway? Martha's sentence was cut off. Silence. A long, terrifying, heavy silence. The living room was no longer a living room. It was an echo chamber. The imported Italian marble floor, usually covered by a thick, custom Turkish rug, was completely bare and cold. The restoration hardware, leather Chesterfield sofa, where Richard usually propped his feet up to smoke his cigars, had vanished into thin air. The massive 6.5-inch flat screen, the custom mahogany media console, the abstract paintings, the lamps, the ceramic vases, even the artificial potted plants in the corners. Everything was gone. What is this? Richard stammered. His voice trembled, echoing off the completely bare walls. He spun in circles, his eyes wide with absolute disbelief. We got robbed! We got robbed! Oh my God! Lord have mercy! Martha shrieked hysterically, dropping her shopping bags. Brand new clothes spilled out onto the dusty marble floor. Richard, where is the TV? Where is the couch? Where are my things? Richard sprinted in a total panic toward the family room, then bolted into the kitchen. The cameras tracked his every frantic move. The kitchen was just as tragic. The double-door smart fridge stocked with imported groceries, the modern induction stove, the microwave, the massive dining table and chairs wiped clean. The only thing left was the stainless steel sink because it was bolted to the plumbing. This is insane. This is insane. Richard grabbed his own hair, hyperventilating. Who the hell could move all this stuff out in one night? Emily. Emily! Richard charged up the stairs toward the master bedroom. I switched my view to the upstairs feed. He violently pushed open the door to the empty room. That $10,000 king mattress setup was gone. The built-in walk-in closets were still attached to the walls, but the doors were wide open, reveal absolute emptiness. Every single custom suit, designer dress shirt, his watch collection, his Italian leather shoes, everything my money bought, had been hauled away. Richard dropped to his knees in the middle of the empty bedroom. His face was ghostly pale, looking as if all the blood had been siphoned from his body. That was when his eyes locked onto the only object left in the entire room, a bright yellow sticky note, slapped crookedly onto the wall right where the headboard used to be. With trembling hands, Richard crawled over and peeled it off. As he read it, I sat in my hotel room and mouthed the words I had written. Per your instructions. Your money is for you, my things are for me. The suit on your back and the Escalade in the driveway belong to me, but I am generous enough to let you borrow them until tomorrow. The rest? Feel free to buy it all back with your massive GM salary. Oh, and enjoy the empty house. The power gets cut off in 5, 4, 3. As if the universe was operating on my exact script, the second Richard finished reading, the camera feeds on my iPad went completely black. Offline. The power company had pulled the plug. I smiled with immense satisfaction and set the iPad aside. The visual portion of the show was over. Now, I could only imagine what was happening in that pitch-black void, and my imagination was wild enough to paint the perfect picture. Inside that house, darkness must have swallowed them whole instantly. And not just darkness, the heat. Without the central HVAC system running 24/7, that massive house with minimal ventilation would turn into a giant brick oven with hours. I could vividly picture Martha sobbing and wailing on the downstairs floor, screaming at Richard for being incompetent and failing to protect the house. "You said you were a general manager. You said you were rich. Why does our house look like an abandoned warehouse?" Her screams were definitely echoing off the walls. Richard had to be having a total meltdown. He would frantically dig into his pockets for his iPhone to call me. Right on cue, my phone vibrated on the hotel nightstand. My husband's name flashed on the screen. I let it buzz until it went to voicemail. He called again, and again. Then, a rapid-fire string of text messages flooded in. "Emily, where the hell are you? What is the meaning of this? Bring my stuff back. Those are marital assets. Emily, pick up. My mom just passed out. Emily, please turn the power back on. It is 100 degrees in here." I simply read the previews from the lock screen, without opening the app, ensuring he never got the read receipts. Let him burn in his own confusion and total helplessness. As the night dragged on inside that empty house, hunger would inevitably strike. Richard and his mother could not cook because the stove was gone. They had no food because the fridge was gone. Richard would definitely try to order Uber Eats, or maybe try to book a hotel room to escape. My phone buzzed again. This time it was not Richard, but push notifications from my banking app. Transaction declined. Visa ending in 4,588 at the Ritz-Carlton. Insufficient credit limit or account frozen. Transaction declined. Visa ending in 4,588 at Domino's Pizza. Insufficient credit limit or account frozen. I let out a soft laugh. "I am so sorry, Richard. No luxury hotel tonight. No warm pizza delivery. Your money is your money, right? Too bad you do not actually have any cash." Richard was the type of guy who never carried more than $40 in his wallet because he felt that slamming down a black card under my name made him look like an elite baller. Now, that card was just a useless piece of plastic. That night, I slept like a baby on a cloud-like hotel mattress. Meanwhile, miles away, a hotshot general manager and his arrogant mother were forced to curl upon a rock-hard, freezing marble floor in pitch-black darkness, swatting mosquitoes with empty, growling stomachs. They were experiencing just 1% of the emotional torture I had endured for 5 years. And tomorrow morning, when the sun came up, Richard was going to face a nightmare far more brutal than the darkness of tonight. Morning arrived in Chicago, bright and crisp. But for Richard, this morning was undoubtedly the sequel to last night's hell. I arrived at the downtown headquarters of Crestview Holdings at exactly 9:00 a.m., flanked by Daniel and 2 of his paralegals. I was wearing an impeccably tailored ivory-white blazer suit. My hair was styled in a sleek blowout, and my sharp, authoritative makeup hid any lingering trace of my past sorrow. Today, I was no longer Emily the submissive housewife. Today, I was Emily Vance, the majority shareholder. We took the executive elevator up to the 25th floor, where the boardroom was located. "Ready?" Daniel asked, as the elevator chimed and the doors slid open. "More than ready?" I answered without hesitation. Walking down the corridor toward the boardroom, I passed several employees who stared at me with a mix of awe and deep curiosity. None of them recognized me. All this time, I had been a ghost in this building, the invisible owner. As I walked past the operations division cubicles, I caught sight of a scene that was both pathetic and deeply satisfying. Near the copy machine, Richard and Brittany were in the middle of a heated, harsh whisper fight. Richard looked like absolute garbage. His dress shirt was horribly wrinkled. It was clearly the exact same shirt he wore yesterday because he did not have Anarin or a change of clothes. His face was greasy, his hair was a mess, and he sported massive dark bags under his eyes. He looked like a man who had just survived a shipwreck, not a newly minted GM. Brittany looked absolutely furious. "You smell terrible, Richard," she hissed, pinching her nose. "You said you were going to wire the condo money this morning. The developer is blowing up my phone." "Just be patient, Britt," Richard defended himself, his eyes darting around in panic. "You do not understand. My house was totally robbed last night by my psycho wife. All my cards got locked. Just wait until this board meeting is over. The second the board approves the Project X budget, we wire the money to your brother's LLC, and we get the hell out of here." "Well, hurry it up. I am not waiting around forever," Brittany snapped, turning on her heel and marching away. I smirked as I listened from around the corner. "Run? Neither of you are running anywhere. At exactly 10:00 a.m., the board meeting commenced. I waited in the VIP lounge adjacent to the boardroom, letting the show begin without me. Through a closed-circuit monitor on the wall, I watched Richard walk into the room. He desperately tried to smooth out the wrinkled collar of his shirt, forcing a confident smile for the senior directors and my uncle, Henry, who sat at the head as chairman. "Good morning, gentlemen," Richard opened, trying to project a voice of authority. "Thank you for the trust you have placed in me as your new general manager. Today, my first order of business is to propose an expedited procurement of new machinery for the Aurora manufacturing plant. This is an efficiency breakthrough I personally designed." Richard clicked his presentation remote. He spoke smoothly, feeding the room corporate buzzwords about efficiency and profit margins. The senior directors nodded, appearing impressed, until Richard finally reached his core slide. The budget breakdown. To execute this, I highly recommend Apex Solutions as our sole source vendor. They offer the most competitive pricing for premium imported parts, Richard stated firmly. On the massive projector screen, the figure of $400,000 flashed in bold font. That was the cue. I gave Daniel a nod. Daniel pushed the heavy oak doors of the boardroom wide open. I stepped inside, the sharp clicking of my stiletto heels against the hardwood floor echoing with an intimidating rhythm. "I apologize for interrupting this morning's fairy tale." My voice sliced through the silence of the room. Every head snapped toward the door. Richard's jaw hit the floor. His eyes looked like they were going to pop out of his skull when he saw me. "Emily? What the hell are you doing here? This is a closed executive session. Security! Throw this crazy woman out!" Richard screamed in a blind panic. His face turned beet red from a mix of absolute humiliation and rage. But nobody moved. Not a single security guard flinched. Instead, Uncle Henry stood up from the chairman's seat and smiled at me with deep respect. "Welcome, Miss Emily. Please, take the head chair." "What? Miss Emily? The head chair?" Richard looked back and forth between my uncle and me in total bewilderment. "Henry, she is just my wife. She is just a regular housewife. She snuck in here." "Shut your mouth, Richard," Uncle Henry barked. "You arrogant fool. Gentlemen, allow me to introduce Miss Emily Vance, the owner of 65% of the voting shares in this holding company. She is your actual boss." Richard's entire world disintegrated in a fraction of a second. His knees gave out, and he had to grip the edge of the mahogany table just to keep from collapsing onto the floor. The red in his face drained entirely, leaving him looking like a corpse. "Majority? Shareholder?" But I walked slowly toward Richard, stopping right next to the projector screen that was still proudly displaying the $400,000 budget. "Please, continue your presentation, Mr. General Manager," I said with a voice as cold as ice, staring dead into his terrified eyes. "Explain to this board why my company should wire $400,000 to Apex Solutions, a company that was registered exactly 14 days ago, operating out of a vacant strip mall in Hammond, Indiana, whose registered CEO is Brad Miller, the biological brother of your mistress, Brittany." Richard choked. Beads of cold sweat, the size of marbles, began pouring down his temples. That is not true. I ran a full verification." "Verified what?" I cut him off sharply. Daniel stepped forward and slammed thick, red folders onto the desk in front of every single board member. "Inside those folders are the complete WhatsApp chat logs between you and Brittany," I announced loudly. My voice boomed with absolute authority. "Complete with your explicit scheme to artificially inflate this budget by $200,000. You conspired to embezzle corporate funds to buy a luxury condo downtown and pay for a divorce attorney to ruin me." The directors flipped open the folders. Their expressions immediately twisted into pure fury. Angry whispers erupted around the table. "And that is not all," I continued, refusing to give Richard a single second to breathe. "You constantly parade around claiming to be a self-made, independent success. Let us set the record straight right now." I hit the button on my own clicker, overriding Richard's presentation with my own slide. On the giant screen, a scanned bank wire transfer from 5 years ago appeared. 5 years ago, you were an absolute nobody. You were an unemployed loser being hunted by loan sharks because you racked up $30,000 in offshore sports betting debt. Who bailed you out? I did. Who pulled strings behind the scenes to get you a job at this very company? I did. I took one step closer, forcing Richard to stumble backward until his spine hit the whiteboard. "You insulted me yesterday afternoon. You told me your money was no longer for me. You called me a parasite. The absolute fact, Richard, is that you are the parasite. You lived off my wealth, worked at my company, climbed the corporate ladder using my connections, and now you tried to rob my money to top it all off. I looked at him with nothing but pure, unadulterated disgust. There was no love left, no pity. The man cowering in front of me was nothing but trash-wrapped in a wrinkled suit. Emily, please, just listen to me. Richard tried to reach out and grab my hand. Tears were welling up in his bloodshot eyes. I made a mistake. I was just playing around with Brittany. I love you. Please do not do this. Let us just go home and talk, okay? Which home? I asked cynically. The pitch black, empty one, or your future home in federal prison? I turned my head toward Daniel. Mr. Daniel, take it away. Daniel nodded and spoke in a strict, formal legal tone. Richard, based on irrefutable evidence of attempted corporate embezzlement, document forgery, and severe violations of our corporate ethics code, you are terminated effective immediately, with cause. Furthermore, our legal team has already handed evidence over to the Chicago Police Department and the FBI for charges of wire fraud and corporate embezzlement. The boardroom doors swung open again. This time, 2 uniformed Chicago police officers walked in, followed by the head of building security, who was physically dragging Brittany by the arm. Brittany was sobbing hysterically. Her makeup was smeared all over her face. Richard, tell them! They are arresting me! Brittany shrieked. Richard could not save anyone. He was violently shaking as the officers slammed him against the wall and locked the steel handcuffs around his wrists. He looked over his shoulder at me with a pathetic, begging stare. The exact same stare he gave me 5 years ago when he was hiding in the bathroom of that dingy studio apartment. But this time, I was not opening the door to save him. Emily, my wife, please help me, he whimpered as the cops dragged him toward the door. Your wife died yesterday afternoon when you murdered every last bit of respect she had for you, I replied flatly. Take him out. Richard and Brittany were dragged out of the boardroom, paraded down the office corridor that was now lined with hundreds of employees watching the spectacle. The sound of booing, mocking laughter, and shocked whispers filled the floor. The humiliation he tried to inflict on me yesterday had just rebounded and smashed into his face 1,000 times harder. I stood tall in the boardroom, which had fallen dead silent once again. The senior directors were looking at me with a profound new level of respect and fear. I took a deep, grounding breath, feeling a massive boulder lift off my chest. The war was won with a single, flawless strike. His career was ash, his reputation was toxic waste, and his freedom was gone. But it was not total over yet. There was still one final act left. A public reckoning in the suburbs to ensure they had absolutely nowhere left to hide their faces. This meeting is adjourned, I said, snapping my laptop shut. The news of Richard's dramatic arrest spread faster than a California wildfire. But my job was not finished. There was still one more parasite left, to eradicate one loud, obnoxious voice that needed to be silenced so my victory would be absolute. Martha. Later that afternoon, after finishing the necessary legal paperwork at the police precinct where I had the pleasure of watching Richard and Brittany sobbing uncontrollably in holding cells, I decided to head back to the house. Daniel rode with me, along with 2 heavily built private security contractors. As our SUV turned into the gates of my elite suburban neighborhood, immediately spotted the circus I was waiting for. Martha was throwing absolute fit. The old woman was standing outside the heavy wrought iron gates of my driveway, which I had padlocked shut. She was bashing the padlock with a rock, screaming like a lunatic. She looked like a complete disaster. Her usually perfectly teased hair was a bird's nest. Her expensive blouse was stained with dirt, and her face was purple from screaming in the afternoon heat. Surrounding her on the sidewalk were several neighborhood wives, the wealthy HOA moms, who had constantly looked down on me for years, entirely fueled by Martha's toxic gossip. They were all standing around watching the show with hungry, curious eyes. Emily, get out here, you ungrateful bitch, Martha shrieked, her voice cracking the quiet suburban peace. How dare you lock my son's house? You thief! Put my son's furniture back! Help me, neighbors! My daughter-in-law has lost her mind. She robbed this house and kicked me out to the curb. Mrs. Higgins, the HOA president who thrived on neighborhood drama, tried to pacify her. Calm down, Martha. Maybe Emily just went out. Please do not scream like this. It is embarrassing in front of the neighborhood patrol. Embarrassing? She is the one who should be embarrassed. Martha spat onto the asphalt. She is nothing but a freeloader living off my Richard. Richard is a general manager. Emily is just some uneducated trash who got lucky. She probably brainwashed my son. That is why he is so whipped. And now she is trying to steal his wealth. I signaled my driver to park the Escalade right behind the crowd. The horn blared, making everyone jump out of their skin. The crowd of housewives parted instantly. I stepped out of the luxury SUV with effortless grace, still wearing my sharp white blazer suit, radiating pure dominance. Daniel stood tall beside me, holding a thick leather binder. "What seems to be the commotion here, ladies?" I asked calmly, though my voice was loud enough to carry across the street. Martha snapped her head around, her eyes bulging with pure rage when she saw me. Without warning, she lunged at me. "You demon, give me the keys! Where is my son? Why is his phone going straight to voicemail? What did you do to him?" My 2 private security guards immediately intercepted her, grabbing her arms before she could even get within 5 feet of me. Martha thrashed and kicked, spitting foul curses that had no business coming out of an elderly woman's mouth. "Let me go. I am going to rip her face off." I stared at her with a deadpan expression, then shifted my gaze to the neighborhood wives, who were now staring at me with highly judgmental eyes. I knew exactly what narrative had been circulating in this cul-de-sac for years. Richard, the successful provider, Emily, the lazy gold digger. Today, I was going to rip that narrative up by its roots. "Mrs. Higgins, ladies," I projected my voice clearly. "I apologize for this ridiculous disturbance. But since Martha has decided to publicly defame me, I believe I have the right to present the actual facts in public as well, so there is no more cheap gossip at your next HOA luncheon." "Facts? The fact is, you are a thief," Martha interrupted. "Shut up!" I barked. My voice thundered, making Martha jolt into silence. It was the very first time in 5 years I had ever yelled at her. I pulled a document from Daniel's binder and held up a watermarked sheet of paper. "Martha claims this is her son's house. Look at this." I unfolded the official property deed, displaying the printed name to the HOA president and the rest of the nosy neighbors. "Read it out loud, Mrs. Higgins." "Whose name is listed as the sole owner of this estate?" "Mrs." Higgins squinted, adjusting her designer glasses to read the paper. "Emily Vance." "Sole ownership." Shocked gasps rippled through the group of women. "Wait, I thought Richard bought this place?" one of the neighbors whispered loudly. "No," I answered firmly. "I bought this property in cash 3 years ago using my trust fund. Richard did not contribute a single red cent. In fact, he could barely pay the property taxes and utilities, and I frequently had to cover those too." Martha's face went chalk white, but she stubbornly kept digging her grave. "Bullshit! You probably forced him to sign it over. You snake! Where is my son's Cadillac? Where did you hide it?" I let out a dark laugh. I pulled the vehicle title out of the same binder. "Who is the registered owner of this Escalade?" "Emily Vance." "I bought this SUV in Casho. Richard would not embarrass himself in front of corporate clients. And how did he repay me? He used my car to drive his secretary to cheap motels." "Liar," Martha screamed, though her voice was starting to crack. "My son is a good Christian man. He would never cheat. You just do not know how to please a husband." "Oh, you want proof of what a saint your son is?" I nodded to Daniel. Daniel pulled out an iPad and hit play on an audio file. It was the dash cam recording of Richard and Brittany in the car, synced from my cloud server. Richard's voice played crystal clear through the tablet's speakers, turned up to maximum volume. "Richard, I am so sick of going home, Britt." Looking at Emily's stupid blank face. "Let us just take my bonus cash and check into a hotel tonight. My mom is being a total pain in the ass too, constantly begging for cash. She does not even know Emily was the one who bailed me out of my 30 grand gambling debt." A horrifying, dead silence fell over the affluent street. Martha's face turned gray, her knees visibly buckled. She had just heard her golden child insulting her with his own mouth. "Gambling debt?" Mrs. Higgins gasped, clutching her pearls. "Yes," I replied. 5 years ago, Richard was drowning in $30,000 of illegal offshore sports betting debt. Thugs literally broke our apartment window. I paid it off in full so he would not end up in a ditch. I kept his dirty little secret to protect this family's reputation. But today, because Martha has continuously stomped on my dignity, I am airing it all out. I took a slow step toward Martha, who had now slumped down onto the asphalt. She no longer looked ferocious. She just looked like a fragile, pathetic old woman. "Do you want to know where Richard is right now?" I whispered coldly, but loud enough for everyone to hear. Richard is currently sitting in a holding cell at the Cook County Jail. He was arrested by the FBI and local police this morning for attempting to embezzle $200,000 from my holding company with his mistress. Jail? Martha stammered. Tears began streaming down her wrinkled face. No. Impossible. Richard is a good boy. Richard is a federal criminal, Martha. And he turned into a monster because you constantly pressured him to be rich without ever caring how he got the money. You raised an entitled, ungrateful sociopath. I stood up straight and looked around. So, ladies and gentlemen of the security team, starting this exact second, this woman and anyone related to her are permanently banned from stepping foot on my property. I am putting this house on the market, and everything inside it belongs to me. I turned to my private security guards. Escort this woman out of this neighborhood. If she refuses to walk, I do not care where she sleeps tonight. Maybe she can go visit her son in lockup. Emily. Emily, please. Martha suddenly lunged forward, wrapping her arms around my legs. She sobbed violently, abandoning whatever shred of pride she had left. Do not kick me out. I do not have a dime to my name. My lease is up. Where am I supposed to go? I looked down at the wrinkled hands gripping my designer stilettos. Those were the same hands that used to point aggressively in my face. That was the same mouth that used to spit pure venom at me. Did I feel bad for her? A fraction. But the damage she had done to my soul was 1,000,000 times heavier. I kicked my foot back sharply, breaking her grip. That sounds like a personal problem, I replied icily. When Richard told me to pack my bags yesterday and said, "Take care of yourself," you laughed in my face and said, "Good for her." Well, I am returning your exact words. Good for you. Take care of yourself. Get her out of here, I commanded the guards. The two massive men lifted the weakly struggling Martha off the ground. She was practically dragged down the perfectly manicured sidewalk, away from the multi-million-dollar gates she used to brag about, followed by the disgusted and mocking stares of the neighborhood wives who finally saw her for the fraud she was. Wow! So this whole time Martha was just broke and incredibly arrogant, one of the neighbors whispered loudly. I know. I feel so bad for Emily. Used, cheated on, and slandered in her own home. I took a deep breath and smoothed out my blazer. The show was officially over. He had completely bulldozed the stage of this fake, happy family until nothing remained. There was nothing left but the rubble of the absolute truth. Daniel gently patted my shoulder. You were amazing, Em. Do you feel better? I looked down the street to where Martha had disappeared. Infinitely better. It feels like I just took out a bag of rotting garbage that had been sitting in my kitchen for 5 years. I climbed back into the Escalade. Let us get out of here, Daniel. Take me to the most expensive steakhouse in Chicago. I am starving. 6 months later, the autumn air in New York City was crisp with a biting chill. However, a deep warmth filled my chest as I sipped a glass of vintage Chardonnay on a luxury rooftop restaurant in Manhattan, looking out over the glittering lights of Central Park and the endless skyline. My name is Emily Vance, and I am no longer the same woman I was 6 months ago. My life had transformed radically since the day of the reckoning. My divorce from Richard went through with lightning speed. Between the undeniable proof of infidelity, the emotional abuse, and his pending federal indictments, the judge granted my absolute divorce in just 2 hearings. There was zero division of assets. The judge ruled that Richard had zero financial contribution to any of my properties or accounts. He got absolutely nothing. Across the table from me, Daniel smiled, cutting into his dry-aged ribeye with elegant precision. We were not officially dating yet. I was still thoroughly enjoying the honeymoon phase of my freedom, but he was always by my side. No longer just my lawyer, but my closest confidant and a very special partner in my life. Oh, a letter got forwarded to the office from Illinois, Daniel said suddenly, pulling a crumpled, cheap envelope out of his suit pocket. It is stamped from the state penitentiary. I set my wine glass down. A letter from Richard. I opened it slowly. The handwriting inside was jagged and trembling, a far cry from the confident signature of a corporate general manager. Emily, please help me. I cannot survive in here. I am in a cell block with 20 guys. They make me sleep next to the toilet. My skin is breaking out in hives. Brittany never visited me. She took a plea deal and testified against me to get a lighter sentence. She told them the whole fraud was my idea. Emily, I am begging you. Please drop the civil suits. I swear I will be your slave for the rest of my life. My mom had a stroke. She is in a state-run nursing facility because nobody in the family will take her in. Please, I know you are a good woman. I read the letter with zero expression. There was no sadness, There was no longing. There was only a very distant, cold sense of pity, like reading a newspaper article about a stranger crashing their car. Karma is a shockingly precise architect. Richard was sentenced to 4 years in federal prison for wire fraud and corporate embezzlement. Inside, he immediately became the target of the seasoned inmates because he walked in acting like a crying, arrogant snob. The last rumor I heard from his old lawyer was that he was doing laundry for gang members just to get an extra tray of cafeteria food. The fake king was now the lowest peasant. Brittany's fate was equally tragic. Even though she avoided major prison time by turning state's evidence, her professional reputation was annihilated. Her name was blacklisted by every corporate HR department in the state. No firm would ever hire a secretary convicted of corporate espionage. The wealthy guy she was seeing dumped her the second her mugshot hit the internet. Last I heard, she was working the graveyard shift as a hostess at a dive bar out in the suburbs just to make rent. And Martha, that wretched woman, after being physically removed from the wealthy suburbs, she bounced around sleeping on the couches of distant relatives. But because of her incredibly bossy nature and toxic mouth, she kept getting kicked out. The stress triggered a minor stroke, leaving the left side of her body paralyzed. Because Richard was in prison and her bank accounts were empty, the state social services intervened and placed her in a poorly funded, run-down public nursing home. She spends her days staring at a ceiling from a thin mattress, completely alone, with no visitors, crying over her golden child who is never coming to save her. I slowly tore Richard's letter into tiny little pieces, dropping them into the heavy crystal ashtray on the table. "You are not going to write him back?" Daniel asked. I shook my head, struck a match, and dropped it onto the pile of paper. I watched the small flame devour the words of desperation until nothing was left but black ash. "No need," I answered. "The past is already burned to the ground, Daniel. I do not have time to sift through the ashes." Daniel smiled warmly and raised his glass. "In that case, a toast." "To what?" I raised my glass, clinking it gently against his. The crisp sound of the crystal ringing through the air was 1,000,000 times more beautiful than Richard's screaming 6 months ago. "To investments?" I replied with a radiant smile, my eyes reflecting the golden lights of the Manhattan skyline. "To the worst investment I ever cut my losses in, my ex-husband. And to the greatest investment I am building right now. Myself." I took a sip of my wine. It tasted sweet, refreshing, and completely free. Crestview Holdings was currently seeing record-breaking growth under my direct leadership. I had fired the entire corrupt old boys club in management and replaced them with brilliant, ethical young executives. The company's profits were up 200%. I was no longer the silent wife hiding in the shadows. I was the CEO. I sat on the throne. And most importantly, I was finally, truly happy. Richard once told me, "Starting tomorrow, my money is no longer for you." He was absolutely right. His money was not for me, because he never had any money to begin with. But my wealth? My wealth is now entirely mine to spoil myself, to build my own empire, and to walk into a brilliant future, completely free from parasites. The night was growing late in New York, but for me, the sun had just started Taurus.